hi to both of you. It's August 13th, Thursday, and we are spread out in Nantucket, Washington, and Santa Fe. And we've decided to share our thoughts like we did with Three Failures on the Couch, which got such a positive response from people hearing about our own personal failures. So we thought we would do one, and the subject of this discussion, and it is just that, is transitions and how each of us are dealing with the transitions in our lives, and each are different, and what we've learned. So let me start, Andrea, with you in Nantucket, with what you've learned during this period of time about transitions.
Well, of course, I had the most, I guess, unusual funeral that anyone has gone to that I know of. And my brother, who died November the 2nd, was such a character, such a wonderful character, and claimed to never be afraid of death and so forth and so on. But the 9 months leading up to his death were just full of the most chaos you can ever imagine. So when it came to the funeral, there was the surprise element in the funeral. We thought maybe 100 people might come, and 300 showed up. My daughter was wondering how to divide the shrimp up and how we were going to break the cookies into 3 parts. And then the speakers got up to speak, and there were 5 of his best friends, and his very best friend was the last speaker. And as he was talking about his sort of love affair with my brother Butch, he upped and died right there. And it was the most amazing thing that I've ever seen. So I tried to just remain as reasonably calm as I could, and the rescue squad came in. And so I had to keep the people away from where the rescue squad was working on my brother's friend, Nikki Michaels. And it was the most unusual and sad and shocking event that, maybe without Bowen Theory, I wouldn't have known what to say. But I was able to say something to calm the crowd down, and about maybe 200 left. And we had enough food for everybody. But it was you have to be ready for the unexpected, and does Bowen Theory really help you with that? My other thought was, does Bowen Theory, when it comes alive and people tell you their stories, does it really transfer the knowledge to other people by listening to these stories? So that was just the beginning here.
Priscilla, your transition. I should say transitions.
From the bucking bronco family to the peace family. Well, my year, how would I say this? My last year has included my stepmother's death in November 21st, and my father's death June 6th. Just had his service on July 26th. So I'm still new kind of from the arc of this period of time, which of course in the middle of this has included my father's isolation and blindness during the period of the coronavirus. It's been a very dense time. And my family is a planful family. My father was planning his service for 10 years. He planned a very eloquent, down to the typing, down to the program. Everything was absolutely planned. a very subtly arranged and robust service that, of course, no one could attend because we were in the middle of the coronavirus, and ended up having the service with only 3 out of the 7 of the siblings present. We had a hybrid service where it was present in the service as well as online, which was very creative, true to my dad. It would have been exactly kind of the adaptation that would make sense to him. It was really a remarkable service. And I think my experience, the richness of this time period, to me was the remarkable experience about being so present every step, which was really kind of one of my goals, is to be present with my father in the dying process that might somehow also help me to be less sensitive to what my earlier life experience was, which was a very disruptive one with an early death of a mother. And I think it has been that, the 10 years of kind of walking towards Dad's death and, you know, being very fortunate to be there when he died, not fearful when he died, being very glad to be there, his death being very peaceful and being able to, you know, feel the last electrical activity of his heart leaving his body. I mean, you know, to me, it's like, I would never have guessed that I could be that. It still brings a little bit of tears, but that I could be that present. And so to me, the transition, surprisingly, was almost as if I had a new sense of kind of how the emotional system works when a person dies. And my father I did not experience my father as dead. I mean, I know this isn't psychotic. I mean, I just experienced him as available in kind of a present way, just as it had been over the phone, or just as it had been in connection with him. And I've been thinking a lot about you know, what is the dying process and kind of the resolved relationship with somebody that has died, and how does that look? So in some ways, I had the thought, for sure, through his service, that I really, you know, I'd done this right, and he'd done it right, you know, and the family was on it, and in some ways, I think that was true. And I've been really interested in the time since then, which the last couple weeks, which is probably a culmination of the whole period of time when he was dying, and my stepmother died. But my own body is now holding so much tension, and it's in pain. And so my latest today thinking is that what also happens with a death is that the deaths of history begin to emerge, or the shadows are present in a way that you also have to keep track of. Like, I was thinking about this with so in some ways, while there was, like with my dad, there was kind of, you know, like there was a resolved experience with him. What it does bring up, though, is still the residue of the unresolved history with the earlier relationship of my life with my mother. But it's not only that. It's like, you know, my dad's death also brings up the earlier deaths in his family that were very disturbing and disruptive. The death of his grandfather struck down by lightning, you know, when his own father was 6 years old, still resonates through the family. And as much as I think Dad's life and the way he managed his life with the family kind of integrated some of that. There's still the history of that, like the Friesen family, that what my dad had kind of hoped was that the Friesens would be able to have a reunion around his death. That didn't happen. So one of the things included in that is his older sister that died in childbirth when she was very young. So it's almost like these earlier deaths that are part of the multi-generational history are still here. As well as you do it, they're still a part of the texture of the system now. And I think that the best thing, what I'm thinking of it today, and I've thought about the last 3 days, is really, that's what I'm addressing in my body as I pay attention, I think, to not only the symptoms in my own body, but to pay attention that this is the way the system works. And that's okay, that this multi-generational system kind of has this, all the generations are present today in a way that, you know, that I think my father's ability to manage his life and his death in a way that is smoother and integrated has an impact on these other deaths, but it doesn't solve the other deaths yet. And I'm not really sure how to lean into that, other than I know that it's a multi-generational thing and it's not healed in one death, or something like that is where I've been thinking. And I'm really using my information in my body, which I've always thought of as kind of a multi-generational vehicle, to be able to keep track of what reactivity patterns are present in my body as reflecting bigger than just me or my immediate triangles, that they are certainly the humans that are living today, that system. But I also appreciate now, you know, that this system is very much in the texture of the present in a way that this particular death has kind of illuminated to me. I had to bring it to the present because it's today is what's really, to me, what the issue is. All this, I mean, I can tell an incredible story that is really a lovely story. And I think it really guides, you know, guides other families, and it has guided me certainly in thinking about how I'm going to do my death, and how, you know, my husband and I are talking a lot about it. You know, what are we going to do? What's it going to look like? Where are you going to be buried? All the things that are, you know, Dad and Lola had to the T. So we have a number of family events, I think, that we have in the future that will be opportunities, I think, to kind of just pay attention to this thread as these things kind of fall together. The burial of Jake and Lola in Mountain Lake, Minnesota, which is the Friesen history, where all the others are buried. Wow.
Well, I will just say that being being with both of you during these two processes of death, I think that you've moved out of the failure category for right now and into the more functional category, leaving one of us, that would be me, in the more failure category. I'm still a failure on a couch or on a chair, let's say, right now. And I think that has to do with kind of the clarity with which you address really difficult emotional challenges as opportunities and move through them with the guide of Bowen theory and operationalized what we've been learning for years. And you did it. I watched Andrea do it as she took the lectern after they removed the body, and was able to calmly kind of move the group to the next part, which was moving toward the buffet and did it with a kind of presence and understanding that we had all just witnessed something quite significant, but that we were all witness and we were moving on. And certainly, Priscilla, with listening to you and then being at the funeral, the weaving of a step family together was a remarkable thing to watch. Now, who knows what happens, but to see it at a funeral, to hear about it for the last 20 some years, and then to see it operationalized was quite an honor. So here I sit in the middle of a transition, and all I can say is that I've got a foot on the boat and a foot on the dock, and it's rocky seas. And the challenge is, where can I live in the time of COVID? My heart is in Washington. Half of my heart is in Santa Fe, and I have not been able to figure out how to do this. The future is exciting to me, although I don't know what it is nor where I'm going to live. But the tension of having an emotional connection to two places and having to make a decision is leaves me in the failure category. I can't get a grip on what is a way to think about this creatively. So I'm still in the failure category, but I am walking like a crazy person, because I read in the New Yorker in July, Adam Gropnik wrote about thinking and walking and the value of letting your mind run free while you're walking. So I'm hiking in the mountains a lot by myself, trying to come to a conclusion of how to live in two places at once. So I love the article, and it's based on Henry David Thoreau's work too, as Walking in the Mountains. So I am hoping that I'm going to figure out how to do this balancing act and do it well. But certainly the transition with family on the East Coast and roots on the East Coast and work on the East Coast, how I can figure out a way, one, to get back safely, and two, to figure out a way to live. So I'm in the middle of a transition, undecided, and figuring that it will make itself clearer soon. So I'm proud of you guys for getting off the couch as failures.
I don't know if I go that far, Kathy. I kind of like that.
You got a foot out of being a failure. Andrea, what was the hardest thing about this death? And I guess I'd ask the same question to Priscilla. What was the hardest thing in managing the emotionality of it? You've worked on this for a long time.
I mean, my brother, I was thinking about the big picture while Priscilla was talking, the big picture. When I think about it, I think I go back to World War II and think about my dad and his, let's say, sacrifice for his country, in which he volunteered as an older man with two young children to go to war. And he was the first intelligence officer to fly a B-29 over Japan. And that he never really recovered from all that he planned and did in the fight against Japan. And so when he came back, the family slowly collapsed. And I think about it sometimes as, is this the cost for one person to be incredibly successful in a way? To, you push my dad out into the world of, as he used to say, now my children don't have to speak Japanese, and unsaid is, but they don't have a father. So there are always these balancing things that go into loss and death. What is your life about? What do you stand for? And what is the cost of taking a stand? And I see that, both of my brothers have serious symptoms that have been pretty much, since my parents fell apart and my grandparents took us on. And yeah, so my brother was called schizophrenic, manic depressive. The medical system gave up on him, said, hey, you know, forget about him. He's going to be in and out of hospitals. Forget about him. I'm like, what's with this crazy mental health system? And he, from 1974 until the last year of his life, he stayed out of mental hospitals. But those last 9 months, he was partially cognizant, and partially he was saying, you know, I'm batshit crazy and I'm proud of it. and he just went off on all these adventures those were the most difficult times for me, to keep my head together when my brother was out buying Teslas and crashing Acuras into the sand dunes and kissing waitresses and getting, you know, just you name it. I mean, just one adventure after another in which I could still maintain a relationship with him. I never got to the answer that mental health gave me: give up on your brother. So I think that was the most significant part of all this adventure with my brother, is never give up. And the recognition of these multi-generational forces before he was conceived, it was already done. I mean, already the pressure in the family, the pressure of what I call sacrifice for the greater good. And that's how I see it.
Thanks. Priscilla?
Yeah, I was going to pick up on kind of the most difficult part for me, I think, in the detail and the granular, was kind of this combination around after my stepmother died, and it beginning in about, I had been going back visiting every other month, but that coincided then with the coronavirus. And so what would normally have been a routine kind of going back to Kansas coincided with my not being able to get into the building. So it was within 10 days of that closing down of the residential system that he was in, the healthcare facility, was when he went blind. So this was his worst fear. And I think the most challenging thing for me was to not be able to go. To not be able to go and be there, and to talk to him, and to talk to him twice a day. We developed a routine. I knew the routine of the system, so I would call. He could count on it. They counted on me. My voice would steady him in a way. But so that part of it was really hard. They did let us come when he was actually dying, so we were there for that. But I think the thing I really marveled at, which is just my dad, which was, even in the midst of going blind and being absolutely panicked and frantic, even in the middle of that, when he would talk to people, he would talk to both the nursing staff, and he would come out of it. He would say, I really am sorry. I'm so frantic. I'm sorry you have to put up with me. I'm sorry that you're up all night because I can't sleep. And he would take responsibility for himself in a way that others would be very gracious and very glad to help him. You know, it was a really interesting thing to see. And when he would talk to me, he kind of rose to his most observing best self. Now, I wonder how much of that he's protecting me, which was fine. If that worked for him, that certainly worked for me. And he was able to, I think, kind of orient himself and to think about it. He would talk a lot about what it was like to be blind, what it was like the fear if his hearing would also be lost. During this time, about 3 weeks into his vision, his going blind, his hearing aid wasn't working. And he was like totally without any senses. He couldn't connect to the world. And being here and trying to relate to that when you knew what I would love to have just gone is just to go and hug him, just go and touch him, go orient him. This is me, and I couldn't do that. So in a way, his actual dying process was really through that ending kind of turbulence. When I actually got there, it was calm. He was calm. He knew we were there. It was like he was ready. And so I guess that was the part that was the hardest for me. Just, he was very healthy for a long time. And then his senses kind of went offline. And it was related to the coronavirus. It was related to the level of isolation that he was put in for his own well-being, I guess, and not. That was really the paradox. I have a whole thing I can talk about nursing facilities and how the isolation really exacerbates the level of the symptoms that are present. But that's another whole thing. But I think that coronavirus is not insignificant in this, because it also affected my siblings who could not be as present in the funeral service or the memorial service. And you don't know I don't know if he would have died now if it was the coronavirus, frankly. He may have lived another 2 or 3 years. I don't know. But this was the time. You could see the forces were this was it. The forces were so great. And this was a good time.
Well, we've almost reached the end of our time. And is there anything, Andrea or Priscilla, you want to add? It's a real thank you to Butch and to Jake Friesen, Butch Maloney and Jake Friesen for the opportunity to hear how you dealt with both of you dealt so differently, but upfront, personal, and close to these difficult situations. Any last words, Andrea, Priscilla?
And I think it's so important to recognize individual variation and how families manage stress. We didn't get to triangles, but it's just so many beautiful stories. Once you can see these patterns that just arise, they're there for you to deal with before you're born. You get dealt a hand, and that's what you're going to have to deal with. And they're all different kinds of hands that you'll get in your life. So I think Bowen theory just helps you recognize these patterns and be better at being your best self, whatever that is, in a sea of troubled waters.
Yeah, and I think getting better and better at leaning in. For me.
Trusting things you don't want to ever do, and there they are, and you got to do it. Yeah.
Thank you both. Thank you.